All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rade Stresavlovich.
I'm Deborah Guzman.
And it's been said you can make an amazing game, but you can't make a success. Your customers make that success. So what we'd like to do today is share with you some learnings that we've had and talk about some trends in VR and set you up to be best positioned to be successful building for Oculus platforms and VR in general. We're going to talk about three core pillars today about how we tend to look at titles in VR and evaluate them. First off is how do we increase adoption on these titles? This is basically two dimensions on that. How do we get people to get into VR, buy more headsets, and then how do we get people to buy individual titles? We look at engagement, how people are using the apps, getting them to use it more often, and really enjoying their time in those apps. And then, just as importantly, and sometimes most importantly, how do you monetize so you could build a successful business in VR?
As we think about this, we want to think about who the Oculus Quest customer is. And with Quest, it was really important for us to make sure that we could make VR accessible and easy to reach for folks. And when it came to Go and Rift, we were able to get a lot of learnings from each one of the platforms. When it came to Go, it was about learning that portability and accessibility was really important. There's a magic to being able to take an Oculus Quest headset and just put it in your backpack and take it wherever you want to go. And when it came to Rift, it was about how important presence and immersion is to everything we make, and about the power of being able to bring both of your hands into VR. So for us, Quest was about the convergence path between those two devices and being able to make VR more accessible and being able to bring it to more people.
So let's take a little bit closer look at the Quest consumer, how they're behaving, and some of the patterns that we've seen. First off, they're behaving like a console customer. And what I mean by that is they're core gamers. There's some casual gaming as well in there. They're buying titles, multiple titles, and they're using it. It's a very different usage pattern than on PC, where you see people that are really sales-driven, buying content, sometimes hoarding it and not playing it, or maybe getting to it way later. Quest, they're buying it, they're using it immediately, and they're using it repeatedly. You've heard us talk about retention before on Quest being really, really strong, and that's true across multiple titles in various different genres. Customers are buying premium content, and they're really, really savvy customers. They're evaluating content on gameplay mechanics, the quality of the art, the overall quality of the presentation, and the price. If your price is high, they're looking for a lot out of that content, and if you deliver it, they're willing to pay for it. Consequently, if you've priced your title a little bit higher, but it's a shorter game or a relatively simple mechanic, they're going to call you out on that in the reviews, and your sales are going to suffer.
Yeah, the team had to work really hard from the hardware side and the software side to be able to deliver a platform that would allow for users to be able to find content that they could enjoy, and that was at that level of quality and polish, since they are a very discerning audience. And to be able to, it's been a joy for us to get to work with developers to be able to deliver top content.
Absolutely.
And speaking of top content, today we'd like to share with you a little bit of insights and learnings that we've taken along with our partners around Quest and launch, and what it was that each of those titles was able to focus on to deliver a unique and compelling experience. And we'll start off with Red Matter. The team at Vertical Robot had a unique challenge and also an opportunity. VR for me is a medium that has the potential to deliver very deep storytelling experiences. And the team worked really hard to deliver something that felt full and self-contained so that you'd enjoy your journey from beginning until the end. And for me, Rade, it was so compelling that I ended up starting the title and finishing it in one go.
That's crazy. Like, I remember you got me into this game, and you were talking about the locomotion and all the just really cool ways that you could traverse the space and how comfortable it was. And once you got into that space, the way you interacted with it, everything was just really clean, obvious UI, kind of like you were just walking through a regular room, but you were in space.
Yes.
Yeah.
And usually I am not I prefer head-based motion, free motion myself. Teleport is usually one of the options. But for me, with Red Matter, they turned locomotion into a game mechanic. So teleport for me didn't feel like teleport. It was me being an astronaut out in the middle of this planet, because what they were able to do was to actually map the grip buttons on the controllers to thrusters. So when you chose where to go, what ended up happening was, instead of blink teleporting, you would weightlessly float up and weightlessly float down. And that enhanced my experience enormously and made locomotion more of an afterthought. I was just zooming around on this planet.
Yeah, you feel like you're that semi-weightless astronaut taking those giant steps with your moon boots and everything, and you get to, it's like that childhood fantasy of being in space.
Yes, and for me, I was role-playing the entire time. I was in this station and I was trying to get to the middle of this mystery, and every decision that the team made was in pursuit of that presence. When it came to rich interactions, being able to, and we say this a lot, being able to interact with the objects that are in your field of vision. So from a customer expectation, usually what we've seen is if you put something in their field of view and it looks like they can grab it, they will try to grab it. And if you can't grab it, that immediately kind of breaks the presence and magic.
Yeah, I mean, it's intuitive UI, right? If you give me a hammer and a piece of glass and I can't smash it, and I'm trying to get out of, let's say, an escape room, it's just really frustrating.
Yes, and that doesn't mean that you have to have every object in the room be interactive, but being very, very specific and deliberate about where you would like to place these objects. You also don't have to fill that up with 40 or 50 items. It can be 5 meaningful items that can contribute to the story. And when it came to Red Matter, they ended up having things on a desk like photographs that allowed for me as a completionist to grab every single item in the room. And the joy that I got from being able to interact with each and every one of them further immersed me into that experience. And also, it's really important when it comes to VR, there's a unique opportunity around taking people to different worlds. And when it came to Red Matter, being able to explore and really immerse myself in that world. And the more that you are able to achieve a design in your game that takes and cuts players off from the experience as least as possible, the better.
Absolutely.
Speaking of exploration and immersion, one other title that is very beloved and I'm sure everyone in this room knows about is Superhot.
I love this game. Like, this is the third iteration of Superhot that I played. I originally played it on PC, non-VR, loved it. Played it in VR, loved it even more. And then on Quest without wires, just really got into it. And it felt like the game kept getting better and better with each iteration as I played it. I wasn't replaying the same thing. I was playing the same game, but it was meaningfully different to me.
Yes, and one of the unique opportunities with Oculus Quest is that for the first time, you don't have to snap turn your way around. It's an option, so if you want to use it, you can go ahead and do that. But for me, with Red Matter and also with Superhot, I didn't snap turn once throughout my hours of gameplay, and that also factored into my experience. So it just adds another depth of immersion and opportunity to the game that you can think about as you think about designing for Quest.
This is an interesting one for me because this is in my permanent rotation for titles I demo to folks that are either new to VR or experienced with VR but may not have tried it. You can look at this, and that mechanic of movement tied to time motion is so intuitive. After like a second or two, just everybody gets it. You don't really have to explain it anymore, and they just have fun playing with it.
Yes, and speaking of easy to get into and being able to demo, it's really important that you think about, especially with a Quest audience, we're working really hard to broaden that audience and increase adoption. And that means that we're going to get more and more people into the ecosystem who are not necessarily very familiar with games. But that doesn't mean that they don't want to enjoy your experience. So there's definitely a superpower to you thinking about what that experience will be, and as the keynote said, what that time to fun is. How long does it take from the moment that splash screen loads up to the moment that you're enjoying yourself? And the more you can capitalize on that, the more likely it is that not only will it be demoed to more people, but it will also be even more of a compelling reason for people to come back to it.
Absolutely. I love this game.
Yes. and also, speaking of locomotion, the team over at Superhot also had a unique opportunity of bringing a beloved 2D title, an IP, over to VR, and then bringing an experience that enhanced the Superhot experience on 2D. So when it came to locomotion, they decided to also turn it into a mechanic. So there are opportunities with VR, especially with playing with things like perspective, right? In VR right now, you could be looking at all of you here in the audience and then turn around and see a universe of stars. And I cannot wait myself to see more titles that are tapping into the potential that different types of locomotion have.
Yeah, I love it. Like the way it's tied to everything in this game. Like it enables so many different ways to replay it. I've played an entire run one time through where like the only way I ever took out an enemy was to take their weapons from them. Like I'm not going to punch them. I'm just going to take something from them, and it just was really like I felt like Jason Bourne or something like that.
Yeah. And also with Superhot, they added replayability by allowing for folks to leaning into their competitive side. I'm very competitive, so being able to do things like speed runs is another great way to encourage players to come back time and time again, because we all love bragging rights. I know I do. And speaking of competitive, I am pretty competitive with Beat Saber. It's interesting because even though right now it's single player, I've never felt like I'm playing by myself because I have this challenge of beating everyone else on that leaderboard, which is another reason why leaderboards can be a great idea for encouraging people to come back to the game.
Hey, we got to give a shout out Beat Saber, the first mega hit in VR, right?
Yes.
Like let's hear it for the Beat Saber guys.
So the team at Beat Games, they love music. They tried VR and they realized that then they wanted to try something in music. So there's definitely another opportunity to building within the realm of what you know and not being afraid to spend a lot of time iterating on what the core mechanic of your title will be. I think as you see some of the examples that we've brought you today, for example, with Red Matter, it is a beautiful, fully self-contained one-time story that you can do and potentially go back to with things like collectibles. And there's also arcade-style experiences like Beat Saber, where you can have a short session or you could have a long one.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that really stands out to me about this one is like there's a fantasy fulfillment element in a lot of the most successful games, right? So in the case of your favorite IP, you get to interact with that world. In Beat Saber, it's really about that connection with music. And even though you're not playing an instrument, you feel closer and more powerful because of the way they integrated and tied everything to that music with those hits. And it just feels like you're doing some sort of really compelling live performance.
And it's really interesting because when you play Beat Saber, it feels so intuitive, easy to get into, time to fun is really quick. A lot of folks don't even do the tutorial and they find themselves already understanding what is happening the second attempt at a song. So that wasn't easy for the team, right? They spent a lot of time. They had a prototype running in 30 days, but then they spent 2 years iterating and polishing and taking things out and putting things in. So there's definitely a magic to being able to find balance when it comes to your title and to not settle, to keep iterating and then not worry about having to do something that is so big. But once you identify what it is that will define your title, to really focus in on that, because you might be the first to do that and to kind of define the language for what that genre is in VR.
Yeah, the iteration and polish is huge. I'm coming up on my 28th year building games professionally, and the one universal truth is the title with the most time to polish, the most turns at that wheel of iterating on their game, always turns out better. It doesn't matter how complicated or amazing a design is, just iterating on something always yields the best result.
And when it comes to building, it's also about giving the player options and also giving them the opportunity, in the case of Beat Saber, you can be as casual as you want in it, or you can try to go hardcore and be in the top 1% in Expert Plus. So
Speaking of, like, this is one of them right here.
I'm not quite at that. I'm expert level, working on Expert Plus.
This, like, building games as long as I have, you get older and you don't have the reflexes you used to. So when we were trying to test Quest and the tracking in particular, I couldn't get past Expert Plus for more than maybe 20 or 30 seconds. So we had to recruit Deb here. And this game became one of the key pivotal titles we used to test that and just make sure it was perfect. A lot of us were saying in the company, including the product managers driving the hardware, that we weren't going to ship Quest until Beat Saber was beatable with no notes dropped on Expert Plus, and I think we did that.
Yeah, it was hard work, but we got there. And we've talked a little bit about some of the top hits that are out on the store today, and we'd like to tell you, well, what does that look like for you as developers and creators? So we want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that you can do today.
Yeah, first thing is you got to nail your key art and your descriptions for the title. This is the first chance customers have to look at your game. And they're just really short attention spans for everybody now. And so if you haven't gotten that dialed in, your conversion rates from the store to a purchase are going to be much lower than they could be. We've got some folks in the store team too. I'm pretty sure they would nod and agree with that.
They're nodding, yes.
The second is your trailer. There's
Yes.
two types of trailers that people usually build for their product. One of them is kind of like this highly produced marketing type of trailer, and the other is more of a gameplay focused trailer. And universally, customers prefer the gameplay trailer. They want to know what's going on in the game, what's their action, what's it going to be like. Doesn't mean you couldn't put in titles saying, you know, this type of multiplayer mode or this many levels, but it really needs to focus on showing the actual game and what that customer experience is going to be. As part of all of this, given the importance of your key art and your trailers, you should run experiments. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to just take out some limited number of ads with different types of key art, key images, some descriptions of your game, and run some A/B tests. The ones that are going to get the most clicks are going to be the ones that you're going to want to put on the product page on the store.
And we cannot really hone in enough, and I see you nodding, Drew, is how important key art is. We have had incredible games shipped to the store with key art that didn't convey to the extent that it could what the game was. And that can mean many things, but to the degree that you can hone in and really show the player what it is that they can look forward to, get them encouraged to click through that key art to get to that trailer.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
You could have an incredible trailer, but if your key art is too ambiguous, then the player won't understand. So if I have a short attention span myself. So if they're scrolling through 10, 12 things, it has to catch their eye. And there's opportunities around font and color, and as Rada was saying, gameplay. So it's definitely, of all the things to think about, once you've got an incredible title ready to ship, being able to really focus on the key art will make a huge difference when it comes to getting people to get to that trailer.
Yeah, put your best material up front. Like if you've got a 30-second trailer or a minute trailer showing your game, don't make me wait until the end to see the best part. Put it right at the beginning. Hook me.
Yes, we've also had trailers that started more like testimonial style, and they were very interesting, but what ended up happening was people were not getting all the way to the end of that trailer, so they weren't even getting to the minute mark that then showed gameplay. So I've been talking about my short attention span. When I buy things, I give it 3 seconds, and if I'm not hooked within 3 seconds and you don't have my attention, I will click through.
Yeah, we see that commonly in a lot of different videos. 3 seconds is the magic number. You got 3 seconds to get someone to watch the next 10 or
Yes.
20 or 30 seconds.
And you know, as we evolve, and we're thinking a lot about mixed reality, we also see an opportunity in the future for us to be able to have gameplay trailers and trailers for your game that have mixed reality in them. There's something really powerful about being able to show that it is an actual human doing that, because even if we did promotion and things like that, if you see right now first person, it can be hard for people to realize that this is not anything other than VR, even if they're not familiar with VR yet.
Speaking of mixed reality, right now there's another talk going on about mixed reality trailers. So when you guys finish this talk, that one will be available online. You should definitely watch it. It's really
Absolutely.
good stuff.
And we've talked a little bit about discovery, people being able to get to your app. But we also want to tell you a little bit about quality.
So we talked polish matters. Polish as much as you can. But just as importantly, I think, is feedback, right?
Absolutely. And not being afraid to get honest opinion and feedback. What can happen is you are, I want to say, almost in a bubble where over time, over a year and a half, you get used to playing a certain way and with a certain comfort, and you might think that that's fine. But when it comes to actual shipping, then our customers are very vocal about whether they have options or not. So definitely something to keep in mind. Going back to Beat Saber yesterday, we had a panel where we talked a little bit about that, and they ended up having about 500 to 1,000 people playing the game at some point, and it helped them decide that maybe they had to take this out and maybe they loved it, but people didn't. So it was a hard decision, but it ended up favoring and helping the title and the title's quality at launch.
Yeah, it's important when you're seeking feedback too to get diverse and honest feedback. Don't ask your parents how the product is. They're going to tell you it's great. This is why talent shows have horrible singers that think they're amazing. Like, nobody wants that. So try to get different opinions, people that play the game differently. And depending on what phase of development you are in, you want to think about different types of people that can provide that feedback. So early on, when a product's really rough, you'll want to talk to other game developers because they're going to be able to make those mental leaps of like, okay, they're here, I know the basic things that they're going to do. I'm not going to give feedback on that, I'm going to focus on the stuff that matters. Later on, you want to bring in more traditional customer type of people that are not going to be as forgiving. But you'll want to balance that out as you're getting your feedback.
Absolutely. And speaking of first impressions, with Quest, we've got an increasingly larger number of people coming in that might not have tried VR before. So first impressions are more important than ever. Also, if you ship a title, if you ship your game and it's not quite ready yet, and you know there's this update coming that makes it 30% better and gets it from 70 to 100, what will end up happening is all the reviews that everyone will read through a month after will be the reviews based on that 70% finished version of your title, which can be hard to move away from.
Yeah, there's a great quote from Miyamoto that's also like kind of gaming law here, is that a delayed game is eventually good, but a bad game is bad forever. And that first impression is huge.
Yes, and it's important to really hone in on that and capitalize on that.
Absolutely. So a little bit further out, things that you can do to position your title for better success in the near future. First off, it's like literally, what are people looking for? So some of the more popular search terms that we see on the platform for Quest right now are descriptors like free and demo. That doesn't mean customers are looking for free content, though a lot of them are, or looking for demo content. They're looking to better understand what the content is before they take that risk of purchasing. And so anything you could do with your key art, your description, and your trailer to reduce that friction so they could look at it and go, oh, I know what I'm going to be doing here. That looks like fun. I'm going to purchase this, will satisfy that need. The other things that they're looking for are apps that are announced but not on the store yet. So making sure you have a really good landing page, your website is up to date, you have some sort of forum for community engagement so that, whether it's Reddit or something else, that you could engage those customers and kind of tease them out with some new information or details on the release date is really important. Or they're looking for apps that aren't on the Quest platform yet, which means you should probably put them onto Quest because there's a customer need for that.
And on the Oculus Store, we're also trying to ramp up our coming soon pages so that we can build that hype and get people excited about your title coming to Quest.
That's right. And then lastly are some kind of category descriptors that folks are looking for. So when I talk about like roller coasters, climbing, and horror, I don't mean necessarily that particular genre, though that's part of it.
Yeah.
They're looking for those sort of visceral feelings that those types of games can provide. Like there's a ledge right here. In VR, I'm walking up to that ledge. I'm like, I don't know if I want to take that next step. It's really hard to force yourself to do it, even though you would be safe.
Yes.
Except here, I would fall and hurt myself. But
we don't want that.
Right. They're also looking for multiplayer now. And as our audience is building, there's enough people in there to sustain multiplayer. Doesn't mean you should put 20 different multiplayer modes and segment your customer base for doing for multiplayers, and don't do that. But you can actually get a community going.
Yes, and speaking of climbing, I'm terrified of heights. but I feel like in VR, I have the opportunity to actually go experience what it would be like to climb and try to get that visceral feeling from the safety of my living room, which is something I'm looking forward to. And also being able to, in VR, I've been talking a little bit about perspectives and locomotion and being able to play with that. And I think what we're seeing here, customers looking for roller coasters, climbing, horror, what that means is they're ready for things that have more breadth and more depth, but also that they want to be delighted. And we don't say this enough, but it's important to think about how it is that you want your players to feel. And VR is unique for scaring you, thrilling you, delighting you.
Yeah, look, a horror game in VR is scarier than on any other platform. Like we've proven that out on Gear and Oculus Go with a couple titles.
So there's plenty of opportunities there. And when it comes to thinking about how to market your game and what you can do, there's also a really unique opportunity with mixed reality. So what mixed reality does is it allows for players to understand what VR is in a way that's fast, quick, and as we were saying, for folks with short attention spans, it really hones in on landing an impression in the first 3 to 5 seconds, which is why here at Oculus, we're thinking a lot about mixed reality for Quest, and really being able to empower developers as well so that they can bring trailers that really showcase what their title is to a brand new audience that hasn't experienced VR yet.
Yeah, nothing is better than a mixed reality trailer to tell you if this is a seated game, a standing game, an active game, and what exactly are the actions you're going to need to do. So like if I've been doing a workout and I'm sore or something like that, and I see something like Beat Saber, I'm like, yeah, it's not for me today. I'm going to wait till I recover before I try that.
Yes, and it's about, for us, we feel virtual reality and mixed reality can allow for bigger adoption. So as we work together to be able to showcase and highlight videos like this to audiences who don't know what VR is, even though they might not have been introduced to VR yet, we can still capture their attention. Like when you see a really cool cat video and you just want to keep watching and share it, which is how Beat Saber actually ended up with over 100 million views on their mixed reality trailer.
A ton of people looked at that. It was amazing. It got them a really good, strong start.
Also, fun fact, I'm actually in this video. Oh, I don't know if you spotted me.
Hey, all right. So some more dimensionality to engagement, things that you can do. One, make it easy for people to get into your product. Don't make me go through like 2 hours of exposition before I get to the fun. Put it up front. If I'm going to demo the product and you think it's something I'm going to want to show off to friends and family, let me save. Make it easy. Get bookmarks. I want to get to my favorite point that I know my friend is going to like. Save it right there and get them into the game. Or like you have other concerns with that, like somebody screwing up your save game.
Yeah, I'm very protective. Let's say that. I'm very protective of my save files, and I cried really hard the other day when I realized I'd erased one on my Quest. So it's definitely great to keep that in mind, especially if you make something that you want other people to share with others. And I've seen this with Oculus Quest. So much social media and so many people sharing this with others because it's so easy. So there's a really great opportunity for you to make something that is going to be so much fun that people will want to show to others. And being safe and being able to protect my save file will also make me more likely to want to show it to others, because otherwise I might not do that.
Yeah, and making it safe also means things like having a no-fail mode for something like Beat Saber, or giving the player a chance to do something before like the bullets start whizzing by and they have to take action. Give them a chance to look around and orient themselves within the world. And that's true not just for new players into VR, but also for veterans as well. They might not understand the mechanic. Just give them a chance to do that. And lastly, make it fun for people to watch. If you know, it might not always be casting, so I can't tell what's going on in VR. So like some cool gestures, I'm sitting like
yeah, we can't get that wrong, right? Everyone knows what this is.
You know what people are doing with Beat Saber, or reaction videos from like, if it's a scary game, getting somebody to scream, putting a jump scare up front. It's fun it's endlessly entertaining.
So it's definitely, there's a great opportunity there for you to think about what this looks like when someone else plays it. Because when you're playing Beat Saber, it's really hard to it's really hard not to stop and try to see what people are doing. And if for now I start moving like this and moving around, then you can kind of tell that might be super hot or space by trainer because I'm trying to dodge out of the way. And it'll definitely be something that catches people's attention. And as we think about mixed reality and virality and being able to hone in on that, something that looks interesting will also make for a great stream.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about our customers and how they're growing and how we're working really hard to increase that number of folks that are coming into VR, it's really important to keep in mind that our audience is global as you design your title.
Yeah, when you're thinking about localizing your title, and you should do that, you should do text, you should do voice if you've got it, do it for launch. When you're launching your product, you're featured on the store, you're getting the most attention, that's when you want to capture all of your different customers. Like if they bought it, they played it in English, had a so-so experience because that's not their primary language, and then you drop another language later that they would have wanted, you're never going to quite get to that high that you got before as if you had it at launch.
Yes, and that will also be reflected on the reviews by our very vocal and passionate customers. It's also important to keep in mind as you design for the customer that fatigue is a thing, and we've talked a little bit about options and how important it is for you to keep that in mind as you design for your audience.
Yeah, when we first started conceiving of Quest and the titles for that, it really was all about room scale. It was a key differentiator for that. And then as we started to get data back about the actual space people had to play in, we constrained that a bit. And now what we're hearing from customers is they want longer games. They want more time in those worlds, more immersive games. And part of that means they're going to want to sit down and play. Like I'm not going to sometimes want to come home and just stand up and move around for like 2 hours at a time while I'm playing something.
Yeah, right now I've been standing here for a little while, and I look forward to being able to go home and sit down on my couch and enjoy my favorite title, whether that's a social experience or whether it's arcade-style game. So being able to give players options and give them the opportunity to, if they want to go for that 2-hour session, begin standing, end up seated, it will go a really long way, and customers will also be very vocal about it one way or the other.
And there's nothing wrong with action. Just consider it in bursts. Give players a rest, and then signal, like if I'm playing a seated game and you need me to stand up, tell me I got to do that. Give me some cues, and then I'll do that. I'll play that mode, like maybe I'm fighting a boss monster or something, and then I'll go back down and I'll explore the world and spend some more time with it.
Yeah, so really thinking about friction and keeping that friction as low as possible. And when it came to Oculus Quest, it was about that time to VR now being, instead of a couple minutes in case I have a number of upgrades or updates that I have to do. With Quest, it's about VR being now a 10-second decision.
Yeah, and also keep in mind, like not everybody has the same physical abilities as everyone else. It might be hard for them to crouch down or move really, really quickly. Doesn't mean you couldn't put that in your game, but also give some other options on how they could get past it if they can't accommodate what you're asking them to do.
Definitely, and we've talked a little bit about things that you can do today, but now we want to look a little bit farther out.
So rich interactions with that environment are really, really critical. If you're, there's something in music for film, they call it diegetic music. It basically means music that's placed in the world that makes sense that it's there. So it could be something like a radio or something else like that. If you're going to put objects like that in the game and there's knobs and I don't like the music, let me go up and turn it off if the jukebox is playing and something like that.
Absolutely, and I would say as one of the key takeaways for today is to not settle. Don't go for genre pursuing, go for genre defining. VR right now is new uncharted territory, and there are so many genres that haven't even been attempted yet, where you have the opportunity as our developers to be the first to define the language and vocabulary that a certain genre will have, and to design it in a way that is inclusive and is really thinking about that growing consumer base in VR.
Yeah, and when we talk about things like role-playing, we don't necessarily mean traditional role-playing games like with fantasy settings and everything else, though I think those would do fantastic in VR. It means you're taking the role of somebody in that universe, and you really feel connected to it. I think the most overused word at Oculus Connect is immersive. And it has a lot of different meanings, but specifically what I'm talking about is if you put me into your game world, I want to feel like I'm there, I can act on it. My choices have consequences on the world. And it could be, the rich interactions that you talked about before. It could be I could influence the story. But having that just grounds me in that space. And especially if it's a well-designed world, I'm going to want to spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, unique worlds, rich interactions, depth and breadth to your title, and really honing in on mechanics that are unique to VR. We just announced The Room by Fireproof. I'm a big fan of The Room. And they were really excited to get to imagine what the world of The Room would be like in VR, and being able to kind of hone in on their superpowers, which are around interactivity and puzzles, and to make them come to life. I don't want to spoil you too much with the demo, but I will say one thing. There's one part where they actually have you hold up a piece of paper and look through it while it's broken to then spawn something behind it. And that's not something that I could ever get on a 2D screen.
Yeah, that's like kind of magic of VR.
Yes, and the team is really also has spent a lot of time iterating and working on how to translate those beloved actions and gameplay mechanics into VR. So there's also opportunities around existing titles like we've seen today with Superhot, and now with The Room for that.
So one of the things we're trying to do with titles that Oculus gets involved with is act as a lighthouse for the development community and take some risks that might not make sense for other people to take on themselves. Sometimes we find a pot of gold, and we encourage you to come over there and build titles based on what you learn from that. Other times we find rocks, and you don't want to sail your ship over there. Maybe you want to try something a little bit different because you think that you could improve on that. That's fine. Take a look at those titles and really learn from them.
Yeah, I think it's really important we've talked about not settling, but also not being afraid to take risks. There are so many different mechanics that haven't been attempted yet in VR, especially around locomotion, opportunities around UI, around how you make your players feel, and being able to kind of combine all of those elements to deliver an experience that's so magical that, as we were saying earlier, it's genre defining, which will make it something that will be really hard for consumers not to want to try.
Yeah, and things like those mechanics aren't always in the game space. Like there's an enterprise app where you basically learn some certain HR interactions, like you're a hiring manager and you have to deal with firing somebody or hiring somebody. And it's a difficult situation, but what they did was effectively built one of the most compelling talk trees that I've ever seen in anything interactive, where it felt like I was having a real conversation. The choices matter. I was reading the emotion on the character's face in front of me as I was making my decisions on what to say next. And it was pretty clear that like when you say something bad, the character gets dejected. Like that sort of thing we're just scratching the surface on. And I haven't seen that done in a game yet. And I'm looking forward to the first title that does that.
Yeah, I mean, it's only been a couple of years since VR started, and back then we thought we only had mainly teleporting around, and now we have free motion, we've got new types of locomotion, and really we're just getting started and just scratching the surface of what is possible with VR.
Yeah, and we've found a ton of surprises along the way. Like back in the Gear VR and the Oculus Go days, we had no idea that roller coasters were going to be some of the most popular apps on the platform, but they were. Same thing with horror. People love those sorts of interactions and feelings that you could create in a VR title that you could never get anywhere else. Connecting with your favorite IP, we saw that with Star Wars. It's about that fantasy fulfillment. Like ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to wield a lightsaber. And until I had a fully tracked controller, I never really quite get it right. I mean, the plastic thing with the other kids at school, we beat the hell out of each other with that and had some bruised knuckles for it. But it's just so much better in VR.
Yeah, and also I've grown up playing games since I could walk, since I was 4 or so, and I've always enjoyed being the hero of these games and knowing that what I do in that world affects that world. So as you design for VR, keep that in mind, because we can see things where you're a bystander and that could be perhaps a little bit less immersive than if I feel like I have an effect on what's happening in the world.
So there's 4 things I'm hoping somebody in this room builds. One of them is the most immersive role-playing game ever built. I love RPGs.
Yes.
I want to go into a world that I want to spend hundreds of hours in VR and interact with it and feel like I'm actually there. I want a simulator, like I talked about before with the talk tree, where it really feels like I've got a social interaction with an AI or even another person that's just believable in a game. That would be so compelling. I want to see unique mechanics, things that I haven't seen before. Take the tried and true, build on that. Everything doesn't have to be a brand new mechanic, but if you're going to do a brand new mechanic, do it deliberately, and like we saw with Superhot, integrate that mechanic into the core of the game and have it tie into everything. And then, like, Medal of Honor, right? Like,
Yeah,
you guys saw the trailer for that.
I got goosebumps when I first watched it.
Like, playing that game and feeling like I'm actually there, and then the way they do those interviews and the interactions with the veterans who were actually talking about what it was like to fight there, like, it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. And that's just scratching the surface. That's the first one doing that, and we're going to see a lot more titles like that.
And one thing, Radu, that's really inspiring to me, getting to work with Beat Saber, is that you don't have to be a 100-man team to find success today in VR. They were a team of 3 who worked on something that they really believed in, had to make a lot of really hard decisions, and were also not afraid to take things out or to just, almost, I don't want to say ego, but like just be humble about the fact that, especially when you get that feedback, that there are things that might be precious to you that if you take out as you listen to this feedback will affect the final quality of that title.
Absolutely. So we're at time. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and hearing us talk about VR. I hope you're as excited about it as we are, and you guys build some amazing stuff going forward. Deb and I are going to be at the speaker chat area at the end of the hall, right outside. It's not quite as hot as yesterday, so it should be pleasant this time of day.
Yes, and we have fans.
Yep.
And also, we're super excited to see what you guys build, and just let your imagination free, let go, and think about different things. Nothing is impossible in VR, and we can't wait to hear about it. Thank you so much.
Thanks.